Hey everyone, we're pleased to announce that this episode of the 84 Million podcast is brought to you by our friends at Luxfolio. Inspired by Bitcoin's success as a corporate treasury asset, the team at Luxfolio is pioneering the Litecoin treasury strategy as the very first publicly traded Litecoin treasury company. Confident in Litecoin as a hard, scarce, and sound digital currency, Luxfolio is proving that digital silver is now institutional grade. With a robust Litecoin balance sheet, Luxfolio is committed to actively supporting the Litecoin ecosystem, collaborating with developers, miners, media, and others, promoting further Litecoin adoption. Luxfolio is setting the standard for Litecoin adoption at the corporate level. Learn more at luxfolio.com, luxxfolio.com. When it comes to mining, pools matter. This is why we recommend our friends at Powerpool. Powerpool is a mining pool built by miners to maximize profits. If you're mining from home with one unit or have a scaled mining operation, use Powerpool for the best payouts. Powerpool supports SHA-256, X11, Blake 2S, Eaglesong, K-Heavy Hash, and of course our favorite, S-CRYPT for Litecoin, Dogecoin, Bellscoin, and others. Mining with Powerpool is easy with a simple user interface, and the platform has all the reporting you're looking for. Powerpool typically charges a 1% pool fee, which is very good. But if you use the 84 million link in the show notes, you will pay less than 1%, and no one is going to argue with that. So sign up, point your machines, and start mining with Powerpool. Enjoy immediately lower fees and better payouts. Cheers, happy mining. Hello and welcome to the 84 Million podcast. Today we're on episode number 43 with Tony the Bull Severino, CMT. Let me give him an introduction here. Tony the Bull is a chartered market technician, CMT. He's a Bitcoin trader and a media personality. He's found on X at Tony the Bull CMT, and that's on the screen for everybody who's watching. Tony, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on the 84 Million podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk in front of the Litecoin community.
Well, we've noticed you've said a few things lately regarding Litecoin, and I think that's really what kind of prompted me to get you on. I want to say 2 years ago, we were near getting you here, and it just never happened. And so I guess now's the right time. So, but before we dive in, why don't you just take a minute to kind of tell us more about you, what brought you to crypto, your inroads to the sort of technical analysis, and your CMT.
Sounds good. I'll try to keep it relatively brief, even though it's quite the story. So initially got into crypto 2017, bought some Bitcoin, doubled my money super fast. Like most people who do that, I thought I was a genius, thought like, wow, I can do this. Started rolling my money into a bunch of altcoins. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't realize we were topping, round tripped pretty much everything. Even like was down on my original investment eventually. As I was sort of like sitting through and holding during the bear market, I noticed very quickly that there was opportunities to sort of sell your stuff higher, buy it back lower. And, I really started just paying more attention to technical analysis. I used to be a big gamer growing up. And I attribute my pattern recognition skills to that sort of thing. Like you're fighting a boss in Mario, you hit the thing 3 times, and then he gets pissed and changes up its pattern. Like that's what the market does to you. So, I try to spot patterns, try to, also anticipate changes. And then, I worked as a media executive for like the last 10 to 15 years, and I was just kind of just getting tired of it at the time. Really found my calling around technical analysis and trading, decided to go for my CMT. And then I want to say it was July 2023. I quit my full-time job and just started doing all this stuff. And, I've honestly never been happier. They say if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And that's kind of how I feel.
Good words. That's very, very good. And I would do want to point out CMT. You have folks on the show talking about charts, and it seems like on crypto Twitter, everybody's a chartist, but you're a little bit different. So maybe you can distinguish what you've accomplished and what you're doing professionally versus someone who can just read a chart. And I don't do a whole lot of that, just to be honest.
Yeah, so I certainly would never want to act like just because I'm a CMT, I'm a better chartist than everybody else out there. There's some extremely talented people out there who come, who don't have those credentials. My thing is I have just always felt like if I'm going to be someone and speak from authority, I want to actually speak from authority and know what I'm talking about. And I knew there was a lot that I didn't know about the market. Um, and the CMT program really forces you to be way more well-rounded than what you might want to be. Like I was very into Elliot wave and chart patterns and maybe some candlesticks and stuff, but it taught me all the indicators. It taught me volatility. It taught me risk management. It taught me statistical tools and how to backtest stuff. And so it certainly raises your game. It's incredibly difficult. A lot of people like to sort of attack me because I have the CMT credentials, and I maybe there's some air if I potentially act like I'm better, but I really don't think like that. But people attack it, and it bothers me because I feel like, man, if they only knew how challenging that thing was. I mean, I failed a couple of the courses going the test going through. It's just and I studied countless hours and still failed. Just the mentality of don't give up. I didn't give up, and I eventually, found ways to study correctly and some additional materials that really helped me get through it. But super proud of it. There's only like 2,000 CMTs in the entire world. There's like a handful of us in crypto. I feel good about being someone who's one of the first in the crypto industry.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I think there's a lot of gravity. I know, again, we talk, even this show, we're talking freely as two individuals, but when people are reading things, you don't know who's going to take an impulse from what you're doing. So for you to do it well is absolutely the best you can do. Because people will chase what they see, whether or not it's correct. So I think you doing extra, being one of the few that actually have the CMT and in crypto, I think that's I think it's a good thing. And it's a kind of an assurance. Nobody predicts the future perfectly, but you've noted patterns. And I think that's what this is all about. So let's go into your tweets about Litecoin. I mean, this is the Litecoin podcast. I think I didn't check your Twitter this morning. It's still very early, just so everybody knows we're very early here. But I believe the most immediate past two tweets of yours were focused on Litecoin. I'll read them here. So on the 26th, it's kind of a quote, but the initial account, Liminal, says you're not lost, you're neurologically remapping. And it says right before everything expands, it contracts. Doubt creeps in, progress slows, setbacks hit one after another, and it feels like everything is crashing down at once. But that resistance, it's not a stop sign. It's proof you're standing at the edge of something big. And then it goes on. And then you quoted it, Litecoin. You have an additional tweet, I believe the day prior, and it just says Litecoin 1M average directional index is above 20, suggesting a trend taking a hold. Plus DI green found to support the ADX. I don't understand all of this. You're going to have to unpack it for me. But you have two immediate Litecoin posts. So tell us what this is all about. What do you see coming to Litecoin?
So the before everything expands, it contracts was like the big standout from that quote. I know it kind of gets a little off path from what we're thinking around Litecoin, but it's that long-term symmetrical triangle that we've spent 7 to 8 years in since the 2017 peak, 2018-ish. And it really shows contraction, like it's a symmetrical triangle is also called a contracting triangle in Elliot wave. And basically, all this volatility is being compressed and it's contracting and it's ready to expand. It's just we're at the phase where everybody is really negative on Litecoin and has kind of given up on it. And to me, that's actually part of the pattern. So I'm gonna show some charts in a little bit, and I'll be able to show you an example of this same pattern and the same sort of sentiment and mentality. And as soon as it broke out of this contraction phase, the sentiment completely switched, and everybody is in love with the coin that I'm going to show you. And it was bizarre because back then, when I was talking about that coin before it broke out, same thing. People were like, Tony, you're an idiot. It hasn't moved in 7, 8 years. It's it's never going to do anything. And then boom, it exploded out of this contraction phase. And I genuinely think that this is the same setup in Litecoin. And since Litecoin is actually taking longer, I think that it's going to produce an even bigger expansion. The longer the contraction happens, the bigger the expansion. So I genuinely think something really incredible is coming in Litecoin, and it's only going to benefit those who have held out this long, because the new people, the onlookers, everybody else is just giving up on it and craps all over it, and they'll be the ones chasing.
Yeah, the 7 to 8 year descending wedge, right? Um, yeah, that's interesting. People talk about 2025, or they've said Bitcoin Maximus, well, they said a few things. They've also said altcoin season is abolished. Some of these people, we'll talk about that. But also, 2025 is the new 2017. Do you see that as correct, or is there some truth in it? Is it right on? I mean, how do you interpret that?
I think there's potentially some truth in it. I do think towards the end of this year is going to be really, really exciting. But I tend to think some of this extends into early 2026, potentially even halfway through 2026. And because of that length, it's really hard to compare 2025 as 2017. It was so dramatic in just 1 year in 2017 that I don't think we're getting that in 20. I think we'll get some excitement towards the end, back half of the year, but it's going to extend to this. So it doesn't quite line up. I do think we're in for a pretty good year ahead. I think there's a lot of differences though as well, which maybe makes sense more to talk about around the Bitcoin dominance discussion. But yeah, I do think exciting times for Litecoin for sure.
Sure. Do you want to show us some of your charts?
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's pop open this screen share quick, and Google Chrome. Beautiful. Okay. Be able to see my charts?
Yep, we're looking good.
Excellent. So the big thing for me, I'm very heavy into Elliot wave analysis. And as you can see from this schematic over here, you get these 5 waves up, and this wave 4 is a triangle, and you get A, B, C, D, E. A always starts at the bottom after the top of 3 is put in. And we literally have these moves. And, to go even further, each wave here is supposed to be like a 3-wave move, like an ABC itself, ABC. You can see them if you really count them out. It was a little confusing here towards the end. This kind of looked like a D and E, but when I saw this get rejected so hard, it's like very characteristic E wave, and E waves tend to happen around some pretty nasty news, and this was the tariff news. It all really lines up so well in Elliott wave principle. And basically what happens is after such a long extended sideways period, you get what's called an upthrust. And an upthrust is extremely fast, extremely violent, extremely strong, and it could take Litecoin much, much higher very, very quickly. And then when you look at the sort of last wave, so if you really count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 5 waves are every 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this last 5th wave here and here, it's over in just a couple months. I think we get something longer here because it's starting from the very bottom. But, it should give you some sense that, maybe we're looking at like 6 months long or something like that, but it's going to be over quickly and it's going to move very fast.
Can you tell us anything about the 2017 kind of movement? And I apologize if I'm pulling something out that you weren't prepared to discuss, because I remember I was there, but I'm trying to think what the time frame was. I want to say it was like October got crazy, and then it kind of ended in December with a little blip, and then January it started to go down. But
Yeah,
it was
I think
wild.
that's pretty accurate right here. Yeah, it looks like October through January.
Yeah. So it's a similar setup now. Now, if we look at 2017, if things repeated exactly, which they don't, I want to say that I'm just going to pull numbers out. Pardon me if it's off by however it's off. I think it's generally ballpark correct. I think the low of that cycle was $3, and it was as high as $3.90. So that was a pretty massive move north over the period of growth. So I think at this stage, if we take a 60-ish low of, last year, I think fall we were in the 60s. It would produce some sort of like $7,000 Litecoin. Do you see that, or is that way above where you're projecting?
That's actually way above where I'm projecting. So that's one of the things that I do struggle a little bit with the analysts and on crypto Twitter in general. I think that, some of the targets are a little too high. We all like to have hope and be excited about the things we're into. Of course, we want Litecoin. I wish it would go to $20,000 a coin.
Yeah.
And, based on my opinion, it should be valued at roughly 1/4 of what a Bitcoin is. So realistically, in that sense, it could go that high. But, there's still market dynamics. There's still, human psychology that goes into these things. And I'm looking at, actually, my next chart is targets. So this is really, I like to look at Fibonacci's.
Mhm.
There are, some measure rule stuff that you can do as well, where you take this measurement from, say, here to the top of this move and project it above. That takes us still pretty much right in this same area. But this is my highest target, which is the 1.618 golden ratio Fibonacci extension, taken inversely from wave three to the bottom of that move, and puts us around $2,000, $2,200. This is the Poloniex chart. If I do it on Binance, it's like $2,048. So basically, on the highest end, I'm really looking at around $2,000 for Litecoin. And I marked out these boxes. This is probably like the area where I'll start taking some profits along the way. And that way, if it doesn't ever reach my highest target, I've at least got out with most of what I was trying to make for this particular play.
Yeah. How do you, and again, we're not giving specific advice. We don't do that on the show, but you're someone who knows. You've mentioned personally what you plan to do. I mean, are there strategies that you think are safe for people to, let's say, roll out of Litecoin if they set certain goals?
Yeah, I think so. This is something I'm a big advocate of, and I've also been talking about on my X account. It is just really have a plan. Your plan doesn't have to be perfect. Just have a plan, because as this stuff starts happening, it does happen fast. And an Elliot wave principle, we call these really big trending moves impulse waves, and it causes us to act impulsively. It's not just how strong the move is and everything like that. So if you don't have a plan, you're gonna get caught in making some mistakes. You're either gonna not sell because you think it's gonna go higher, or you're gonna sell too soon. So have a strategy. And the way I like to look at things is I like to sell in, like, say 10 or 20% like tranches. And that way, if you're selling 20% of your stack at one level, it gets a little higher, you sell another 20%, you sell another 20%, and you have like another 20% left over that you're going to sell manually if it goes way higher and exceeds your target. So I would urge people to come up with a plan like that. Think of your profit targets as something that's going to make you feel good and make you happy about your investment, potentially help you financially. Don't look at what's going to make you rich. Don't look at what other influencers and stuff are saying online for certain targets. I mean, they get pretty bonkers out there for most coins. And you have to keep yourself in reality, because if it doesn't go to those crazy prices, you could get stuck. And then, I am going to just quickly go back to this chart. When you complete 5 waves, a nasty bear market starts. So you completed 5 waves here, and this started. You've completed 5 waves here, and this started. So when this bigger 5-wave sequence is over, there's a strong chance we're getting a pretty nasty bear market. So I really urge people to get out and if you're such a big believer for the long term, hold some. There's nothing wrong with that. I've held some through the last bear market because I was a believer. It we don't have to get rid of everything, but just the point of investing is truly to make money. And if you don't have a plan to do that, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So yeah, just really keep your eye on the ball. That was a good question.
Yeah. So in terms of what do we have right now? or around what, $110 per Litecoin. I mean, if it hits 2,000, I think it's pretty still. I would say it's still on a fire sale. It's not going to be $3 again, but it's definitely, if this plays out like we think it is, it'll be a lot higher when it lands. Sounds like late this year to early next year, if these things project appropriately. And I know people probably expect you, Tony, you told me it has to, like, no, there's no crystal ball. But we do appreciate what you're sharing here. And I think it is insightful, seeing that you do this professionally. So in terms of it going, let's say we get a parabolic rise. I always hate the term parabola, right? Because it's only one side. The full parabola is tracing it back down. But do you see a higher low after the highest high? In other words, if it goes to $2,000, it's not going to drop to 100. I mean, maybe it will, or maybe it'll drop to 400 as the new low for the next 4 to 8 years. How do you see
For
that?
sure. I see a higher floor level eventually. So in my opinion, I really don't like to say these things because I feel like it always jinxes stuff, but
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't think we'll ever see Litecoin under $100 again, ever. And so when this move finally happens, sure, it goes to $2,000 or whatever, and it's gonna eventually retrace. We have a great question later up coming up about institutions that I want to talk about, which ties into this, but we'll get to that then. But yeah, I definitely think, if I had to guess, it would probably be maybe $200, $150 would be the new floor. That maybe seems a little low. I think so much time has passed that it really should be more valuable than it is. So I definitely don't hold me to those lows. I'm just I'm looking basically back on the chart to see where I think that may be feasible. But yeah, I don't think we'll ever see it below $100 ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the program of 84 million is a fact, right? Just like the program of Bitcoin's 21 million is a fact. You can't undo that. And I don't think we really realize how scarce Bitcoin and Litecoin are. Like, they're precisely scarce, and they're on an inflation schedule until they stop. And that's a diminishing inflation schedule over the halving cycles. So yeah, you alluded to kind of institutions. I know we have several ETFs around the world that are pending. Well, not pending around the world, pending in the United States. In our market, there's several pending ETFs. I know Grayscale is a conversion from the LTCN Grayscale Litecoin Trust into an ETF. You have Monochrome in Australia. You already have Hashdex bundling it in with their non-US fund, but they're applying for a US fund, which will include Litecoin. So some folks at the institutional level have Litecoin, but it looks like that's going to really start to expand. And this doesn't count in also the treasury companies. Our show sponsor, Luxfolio, they were the first Litecoin treasury company. They're based in Canada. So they're accumulating Litecoin. The most recent one is May Pharma that came out, I want to say maybe 2 weeks ago now. And they announced an initial entrance of 100 million in Litecoin for their treasury, possibly doubling, tripling, and beyond, depending. So how does this change? In other words, are these baked into these charts now, or are they to be considered? In other words, you're seeing charts, or how I'm viewing it is I see waves, and you're kind of patterning here based upon what already exists, right? You can't go to the future yet until those days are mapped, and then you can add them to the chart, right? So are those priced in, if you will, or is it something where it's really impossible to know until those things start rolling out?
I don't think that they're priced in at this moment. I think that, we saw a little glimmer of that starting to get priced in, but that's the thing, is institutions are seen as such as a wonderful thing right now coming into crypto. And there's truth to that. I mean, $100 million into Litecoin is a good chunk into the market cap. So, that type of investment is clearly going to have an impact. The thing about institutions is, if you, so anybody who sort of has looked into Wyckoff theory, was created by a man named Richard Wyckoff, and basically he He called them the composite man, and it's basically whoever's sort of like the big players behind the scenes, pulling the levers and controlling the market, and they know how to accumulate assets over a long-term period, and it doesn't move price. It's when they've sufficiently accumulated, then the markup phase begins, and they send the prices a lot higher, partially because they own so much of the supply, whatever the reasons may be. So they definitely have some advanced tools. They may be accumulating and may have been for months to even a couple years now, and we aren't seeing that on the chart yet. But when it finally shows on the chart, it will be fast, and I think that's what's going to contribute to all of that. I think probably what we're waiting for is some of the spot ETF approvals here in the United States. I think once that happens, people saw what happened to Bitcoin price after the ETF was approved, even before, and all those things. So I think that naturally people will start, really running towards Litecoin. And when price is going up too, people will continue to run towards it and everything. So I just think it just has to clear this level, and we'll start to see more FOMO from retail. We'll start to see more FOMO from institutions. We'll hear more about institutions that have already done things and just didn't pre-announce it. I will say, though, a lot of people look at the institutions as something that is going to ensure there is no such thing as bear markets anymore, or make number go up forever. And while they do have advanced tools, strategies, teams, programs that they run algorithmically, there's still humans driven by emotion behind all these things and are subject to other humans in the market. So overvaluation creates undervaluation, undervaluation creates overvaluation. I think we're significantly undervalued right now. It will move quickly to overvaluation, and then it corrects again. So, anybody listening, don't take institutions as this guarantee we're not seeing bear markets, we're going to see adoption forever. Don't forget that the dot-com bubble was bought up mostly by institutions, and everything dropped 90 to 99% after. So, just because they're institutions, they make mistakes too. They get in over their heads. They bought low enough and didn't, quite sell, or whatever the case. Or another thought is, institutions are a lot savvier. They're probably going to be the ones who are selling along the way up, using a strategy like I recommended earlier. So, you have to think like an institution. Are you going to hold forever and just hope it goes up, or are you going to take profits at times and secure that the money that you made, reinvest it when it goes? That's the strategy. That's the mindset you need to have. So just don't buy into that new paradigm type thinking. If you ever see those market cycle charts out there, it ends at the new paradigm. So once people are like, wow, things have changed, it's going up forever, that's when it's over. So kind of keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot there. I want to talk about minor reserves. Do you ever look into the consequence of minor reserves? In other words, if there is significant demand, can the miners actually offset that demand? For example, in 2017, June, so that was before the big move up at the end of 2017 into early 2018, I guess, when it started to cool off. Minor reserves were at 6.5 million. And checking recently, currently now we're at 2.6 million, or more than half of what was available for miners at that time. Now we've had halvings and things like this, but the point is miners don't have as much today versus what they had available in 2017. Do you see that having an impact as well?
I do, yes. So the miners are pretty much constantly sell pressure. That's just how they get their revenue, is to sell the coins that they're mining. They tend to hold them though and accumulate more during the phases that price is rising, because it makes more sense to wait to sell. So if you look at the minor reserve chart, so right before, say, December 2016, miners started accumulating pretty hardcore, and you saw the minor reserve spike. We're just starting to kind of make a similar move in that now. We haven't really spiked up, but it's low enough where the sell pressure should be minimal. It shouldn't have much impact. It shouldn't be really contributing too much to supply. And it may be even shifting towards demand. If we see that metric spike similar to the way it was in 2017, I think we're seeing the early signs of this upthrust move and this final wave up.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you recently published an article called Risk On. Now, this may depart from our topic of Litecoin. We might end up back there, but what are you describing in your Risk On approach, and why now versus other times?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, if you have followed my account, I did get some notoriety throughout the first half of the year for being a little bearish on Bitcoin. The thing was, is I watch momentum indicators a lot, and the momentum seemed to be teetering over into a bear market every time this certain momentum signal fired before we went into a bear market. So, based on probabilities, I was assuming there's a chance we could go into a bear market. I took some profit off the table. Altcoins were still doing really poorly. It almost looked like they were going to do a larger wave down. I even said, which is interesting, one of the only things that kept me not fully bearish was actually Litecoin and how good this setup was. It still looks like its move needs to, the final fifth wave move is coming. And because of that, I didn't fully go bearish, but I mean, I did go pretty bearish on Bitcoin for a little bit there. And when bearish signals fail, it's incredibly bullish. So we saw momentum. It was basically like a long fought multi-month tug of war. Bears pulled it to their side for a little bit, but bulls ultimately pulled it up. And because of that, I don't think that bears are suddenly going to regain control. I think that what has happened is bulls won. There's more demand than supply, and Bitcoin made another move up, and altcoins made a really beautiful recovery, especially Ethereum. I thought that Ethereum was like basically dead for a bit, and now it's back at 2025, 2024 highs and everything. So market just reversed quickly, and with support of all these sort of like positive things around institutions, positive developments around legislature, it just seemed to me that the fundamentals were keeping the technicals from turning bearish. And when you get this combination of technicals looking right, fundamentals looking strong, and even sentiment starting to look strong, it's like you just have to join in on the trend. Especially someone like me. My job is to make money by being in an asset or even shorting an asset, and you have to ride the trends when they're visual, there. And I do think that the trend is about to blossom again. I rode most of the way up on Bitcoin and all these coins. I just got cautious for a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, so the risk on approach. The risk on is really also about some shifts in the macroeconomic situation. The tariff shakeup sort of has stabilized. It's not causing as much volatility in the market. People aren't even believing most of the shit that is being said anymore. And then we have the copper and gold ratio turning. So gold is a safe haven asset. People put their money in that when the economy isn't doing well, they're fearing inflation. Copper is an industrial asset, or industrial metal, I should say, that is used in, all copper wiring and pipes and, all kinds of things. And especially in energy infrastructure, the wiring and
Right.
whatnot. And if we have this AI boom demanding all this energy infrastructure here in the United States, because we don't want to be left behind by, in other countries, I think the demand for copper is actually going to significantly increase. Gold is sort of stalling out a little bit, and that's an economic signal that usually signals risk on. So that, combined with the crypto market charts looking better, a lot of things turning up, showing strengthening bullish momentum, I just see the risk on coming, and it's time. And even when I was bearish, I kind of had said to everybody, if I sell my stuff and I'm in cash, I don't lose any money if prices go down, and I still have all this money to buy back in once I see it looking good. And that's where I'm at. It looks like it's ready. It looks like we're going to see some breakouts over the next quarter or so, and it's going to be very significant in my opinion.
So, in other words, for the individual person that may want to invest, risk on suggests having a higher risk profile for a period based upon it looking a much more or much more positive and producing more opportunity versus we're entering a season of risk, get out.
Yes, correct. So risk on, it means you want risk. You want your appetite
Exposure
is
to
ready
risk.
for risk.
Okay.
Yeah. And when we're risk off, you want to just kind of mostly stay in cash, potentially get into some defensive assets. Gold was the play for a while. Even Bitcoin, worked more as a safe haven asset over the last couple of years, and the risk was looked at as altcoins. And this we're already seeing the change in the way altcoins are behaving, especially around Bitcoin dominance.
So let's talk about Bitcoin and Bitcoin dominance. Maybe first, before the dominance thing, where do you see Bitcoin going this cycle? There's different numbers being thrown out by different people. Where do you see that, and how does that relate to, I guess, rolling certain portions of your Bitcoin gains, Bitcoiners, into other things like altcoins? Again, we'll look at the dominance, we'll look at the price.
Yeah. So I personally have always had a target. I mean, literally for years have had a target of around $160,000, $161,800, and that is the 1.618 Fibonacci extension of $100,000. And it's just something I'm really big on the whole Fibonacci thing and math and mass crowd psychology. So I that was a number that really stuck out to me. But some other fib extensions that I have point up to $190,000. I personally don't think we go over $200,000 this cycle. I think those are the numbers that keep people holding, and causes them to miss the top. But anything's possible. I can't rule those things out. We could have some much more extended cycle where we go higher, but between 160K and 190K is where I think we're going to land. And then,
Yeah.
no, sorry, go ahead.
Do people exit and go into alts at the very end, or they do it first? How does the dominance, and where are we now in terms of Bitcoin dominance?
That's a great question. And I think so. This is going to throw people off, in my opinion. I alluded to talking about this earlier, but although there's some similarities between 2017 and now, there's some major differences. And the key difference is, to me, is everybody knows what crypto is. Everybody knows what Bitcoin is. And back then, not only that, did people not know what they were buying into. It was a lot of speculation and hype and just like hope and wonder, and that's kind of gone. But also, there wasn't really a way to get altcoins easily in 2017. You usually had to buy Bitcoin and trade your Bitcoin for altcoins. Granted, some mainstays were on Coinbase and stuff like your Litecoin, like your Ethereum that you could buy with cash. But most of it you had to trade, you had to buy Bitcoin and trade for the altcoins. And what I think that caused Bitcoin to frenzy even more because people were just buying a Bitcoin at any price because they were just going to stick it into alts anyway. So I don't think we're going to have the same sort of rotation in the same way. I think it happens, but I think it's going to actually happen where alts start to pop much more, like much earlier before Bitcoin tops, so that the assumption is, oh, Bitcoin's topping, it's pretty clear now, I'm going to throw my money into alts. But I think they're also going to almost be over at that point too. And other reasons, if we are being mostly driven by institutions, I don't see them going into as much like garbage coins and stuff that they did, like that did well in past cycles. I think it's going to be mostly around coins with scarcity like Litecoin. So I think that's another reason why Litecoin's a real winner. They don't want to put their money in, Pepe the Frog and things like that. So it just, in what institution is going to like show in their balance sheet that they got meme coins and so it just doesn't make sense. I don't think we have as wild of an altcoin season as the past. And another reason why I think that the alts could do well while Bitcoin is still going, I actually see a situation where the alts, like a Litecoin, get their ETFs approved, they take off, and then I think that actually pulls Bitcoin up. I think Bitcoin's actually meeting a lot of resistance and a lot of sellers at this point over $100,000. But I think that these altcoin runs are going to actually pull Bitcoin up higher. So again, it's not going to be quite what we've seen in the past. I think that'll trip people up. So if you are going to, roll the dice on some altcoins, I would highly recommend looking at stuff that has real fundamental value, has ETF approvals on the horizon, and has some type of scarcity. We're still in a market more so almost driven by fear. In hopeful markets, people buy up anything and hope it does well. In fearful markets, they're defensive and they only buy things that make sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good stuff. I think so some of us in Bitcoin and Litecoin and the space entered by way of precious metals, right? We even talk about the analogies, Bitcoin is gold, Litecoin is silver, digital forms, right? So let's talk about silver. I want to say you were commenting or wrote about that recently. And I just think it's fascinating to consider what's gone on with silver, because to me, it seems like that thing hasn't moved in quite a period of time. And I hate bringing up the idea of manipulation, because it's like, what am I basing it on? This stuff's beyond my pay grade. I can't. But what are your thoughts? I remember in COVID there was a run, like if you went to AppMex or whatever and try to get silver, you couldn't get it anywhere. And yet the spot price didn't go up. The premium did. The premium was basically the same as spot. So that's way higher than a traditional 3% norm. And I think they're still pretty high, the premiums. But I mean, you didn't see, silver go from $20 to 500 or something. And that seems strange. It's like there's no liquidity and yet the price doesn't budge. So again, I don't want to wear it too strong a tinfoil hat on this one, but what are your opinions on that? And where are we at with silver? What are you seeing with silver?
So are you still able to see my charts here?
I can see, yeah.
Yeah. So I pulled up the silver chart, and basically we are on the cusp of breaking out of a 40 plus year cup and handle. In fact, this was in 1980.
40 years.
So
Wow.
yeah, so we're looking at literally 45 years. It's older than me, this pattern. So I mean, I can't even imagine what is going to come out of this. And if this is the relative strength index. It's brushing right up against this downtrend line. It's above 70, which shows that we're very strong. So the likelihood is that this is going to push up. In fact, so this is the yearly chart as well. So this is like a longer term looking thing. The Bollinger Bands, when you start to go above them, you get these big moves up in silver. And as you can see, we're actually above it here. So I do think something really great in silver is coming. And finally, we're going to see the price move that should have happened. I lived that COVID thing. That's when I really started buying up a lot of silver myself. And I remember being like hesitant, like, why am I paying such a premium on these silver bars when,
Yeah.
it's not reflecting in the chart and the price basically. So the problem is with silver is it's a heavily futures driven market. So there's even though silver supply is low, there's tons of paper silver. And the paper silver is controlled mostly by the people who matter the most. And because of that, it's sort of it's like the paper silver gets traded and it doesn't really impact the spot price. It also allows these players who control most of it to actually suppress the price and manipulate the price. A great example is JP Morgan was actually fined almost $1 billion for manipulating precious metal markets, including silver. So it's literally proven that they manipulated the silver market. In this situation, they had one of the largest hoards of physical silver while also shorting it in the futures market. So they're shorting paper silver while holding physical silver. So this dual position just gave them enormous influence over the market. They were able to suppress prices and I'm sure make money on all that madness and everything like that. But eventually, especially for assets that do have these low supplies,
The market
like a Bitcoin and like a Litecoin, the scarcity, the supply and demand can shift even when there's all this other fake supply out there. And I think that is what's about to happen in silver. And we're going to see, I mean, I use the measure rule on a lot of these patterns, and this was a, say, 900% move. You would then project from here a 900% move. It's not even on the chart anymore. I have to bring the chart down and start over. So yeah, silver, in my opinion, could do almost a 10x. And, having your money in precious metals could go up to around $390, $380. And having your money in something less volatile than crypto is fantastic. I really am a big advocate of smoothing out the volatility in your portfolio with precious metals. I had done that starting in like 2020, 2021, and I kept buying like all through 2022, 2023. And it ended up being fantastic for my portfolio. Silver's done pretty well in the past 2 years, and gold did phenomenal. So, and I got to have those gains in my portfolio without, worrying about a 50% crash in one day and things like that. So, big advocate of precious metals. You know, any sort of investment, a hard asset that you can custody and hold yourself, I'm a fan of. And then even in financial markets, there's these so-called secular shifts from hard assets to soft assets, from soft assets to hard assets. We just spent a very long time with we favored soft assets like the stock market, and we're shifting towards that hard asset mentality. We want to control gold, Bitcoin, commodities, even just like corn, soy, cocoa, all those eggs, all those things were going crazy for a while because they're hard assets, they're tangible assets, they're supplies of things that you can, really count and pay attention to. So, yeah, I think that this all kind of ties into this mentality shift that I'm talking about, where they're not going to buy, institutions aren't going to buy meme coins. They're going to buy Litecoins. They're going to buy things with scarcity, things that were, similar attributes to precious metals and commodities. It's a commodity cycle.
Yeah, commodities, and you build civilization with commodities. That's a good point, and I want to tarry a little bit longer because my one criticism, and I've said this before in the podcast, we have to observe and take what we have now and think of possibilities, right? Good scenarios, not so good scenarios. My only concern with a lot of institutions coming into Litecoin was, for example, something like this, where you have silver, a commodity, a physical commodity, and yet there's so much paper silver, they were able to suppress it, like you're sharing for, looks like a 40-year period of time. Now, the nice thing is the market will win, right? And you're suggesting that with what you're seeing here. But are there any concerns with that for cryptocurrencies like Litecoin with ETFs and things like that? Or is that a different animal and it won't exactly behave the same way?
No, actually, I do think that paper cryptos are eventually going to be an issue. I guess maybe sort of an example of that to me is what's going on with MicroStrategy. Like, you can't just continue to inflate yourself with Bitcoin, and I think he's getting in way over his head, and I think that ultimately, what he's basically, MicroStrategy is like a big paper Bitcoin company, and like the valuations based off Bitcoin's valuation, and then they have all these sub products. I think we'll see tons of that happening. I think all these treasury companies. And not only that too is a few months ago, Michael Saylor was at the Bitcoin conference and asked about, you're going to do proof of reserves, and he said no. It's like putting your kids' bank account information online. Scammers can take it or whatever. So that was a weird thing when, like, you really can't steal someone's Bitcoin. It's not an easy thing, especially not someone of that caliber. So, is all his Bitcoin spot Bitcoin? Is there paper Bitcoin he bought? I just do think it's going to be a problem. Humans always find a way to create more supply of something, even when it's scarce. That's why we got rid of the gold standard and moved to just a fiat world where we can print whatever we want. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, like, the Europeans came over and made glass beads, and so, that was being used as currency in Africa. And, it's like we just always find a way to, and it screws us in the end. It screws civilization in the end. So it's an unfortunate thing. It very well could be the reason for the next bear market. It could be the reason for why the next bear market is so bad. I don't know. Obviously can't see in the future, but I definitely think there's potential for that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's a reiteration that honesty needs to be a part of it, and unfortunately, it doesn't always seem the case with humans. Um, now we won't go further. I think we've done a lot here, and I want to be conscious of your time. Maybe the broader market concerns. We talked crypto, a little bit about precious metals. What's your outlook on kind of the broader market right now, where we're heading, and what would a correction look like, and when?
Yeah, so I have some real interesting thoughts around that, and it's not a popular take, to be honest. So now I showed you earlier on that the Litecoin is basically looking like it's just needs its fifth wave to complete in the sequence, and after five waves, it's a bear market. I see those same sort of five wave setups in pretty much everything, including the stock market. There's all kinds of longer term cycles. There's a type of cycle called the saculum, and it's basically like someone's entire lifetime. It's between 90 and 100 years. We're 95 years since ish, since the 1929, Wall Street panic that led to the Great Recession and the Great Depression. Sorry. Uh, we have had this terrible sort of like a recession coming coming mood over these markets for years, and it
Yep.
really never has, not quite has come to fruition. I tend to think it does, just as everybody's like, it's not happening anymore. Look how good everything's doing. Well, markets went up so much. It's been so long. When they finally sort of accept, oh, we're not getting this recession, boom, we're going to get something that is just it's just honestly, I think it's going to be worse than the Great Depression, and what it's so many things. I'm a mass crowd psychology guy. I look at the psychology of humans in the broader context, and when I just see the excess and the kicking the can down the road and all the things wrong out there with people, the government, the media, all of and these things always repeat historically. There's a book called The Fourth Turning that I'm a big fan of that basically has highlighted how things collapse every 100 or so years like clockwork, and it leads to major world changes, sometimes the end of certain superpowers and civilizations. And while I don't know exactly what's going to happen, how it's going to play out, it's very clear that we have a lot of there's disagreement in the United States. The debt is out of control. There's no real way to get a handle on it without shutting down all major institutions in the country, like education and health, and it just there's just so much broken, and we just keep on putting the band-aids on, the money, turn the money printer on, put the band-aid on, and it's got to all come undone eventually. And I know there's always these sort of people, these doom and gloomers who come out and say these things and have said these things for 20 years and 20. I don't want to be that guy, but everything I've read and all the technicals and the Elliot wave stuff and just really seems like it's happening and it's here. It just sometimes these things. I was taught early on that tops take longer to form than bottoms. Bottoms, you get this V-shaped reversal and boom, you're up. Tops sometimes they're a little bit more ambiguous. You don't know what's happening. It's really hard to see through greed in making money. So I just think that we could be in this topping process now, and like on a longer term scale, and none of us really know how to play it. None of us know what it's gonna turn into. It's almost impossible to fully prepare for. So yeah, I just think some big changes are coming to the world in general, and all these sort of technicals and charts and cycles and whatnot appear to support it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as long as we have the Fed, there's no more business cycles and no more recessions, and that's the reason and the mandate. And yeah, right. And that's over 100 years now. But I mean, the dollar, as much as it is still the dominant currency, is also seeing some challenges too. So, I mean, that could be quite interesting to observe if anything happens with that order changing. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. I know you're on Substack. Where do we find you? How can
Yeah,
people get
so
more from Tony the Bull?
I do a weekly newsletter called Coin Chartist VIP. You can find me on coinchartist.substack.com, and it's free, but it's also premium. I probably give like between 5 to 10 charts out free every issue. I try to make it really good, obviously hook people and make them want to sign up for more. And the premium is always as technical as I can make it. I try to tie some sort of narrative that's happening into the market so it makes sense. It's enjoyable. It's a good read. And it's really some of my best work. I also have coincharters.io. It's a free technical analysis website. It's literally just like it's a work in progress, but it's designed so that people can learn this stuff. It's got Japanese candlestick patterns, chart patterns, how to read trends, all kinds of things, and it's entirely free. There's not even ads really or anything like that on it. I just wanted to make a good resource for people. And I'm going to continue to work on that. And then finally, I am a mentor on slice-app.io. It's the Slice app. There's a bunch of really great, solid mentors on there. I'm on there with like Finance Camel, Sunny, and Kimozabi, a bunch of other people from the crypto space. And it allows me to be a little bit more hands-on with people where I can do chart requests. I can answer specific questions. I also take live trades that you use Slice's capital. It's not real capital, but I mimic the trades that I'm using with my real capital. And you can see what I'm doing in real time, where I'm putting my stop losses, where I'm putting my price targets. And I do have a trade open on Litecoin that is in profit. It's got like maybe like an 18% ROI right now. It's just a spot trade. And it's going to be fun to watch, and it's fully transparent. I can't delete it. So if I end up, crashes on me and I lose money, everybody will see it. If I end up, it goes to $2,000, everybody's going to see it. And I'm going to have proof that I did it the right way. So, great platform. It's growing. It's still early, but I like to get on things on the ground floor. And of course, you can find me on Twitter, and I'm also involved with Bitcoinist.com and NewsBTC.com. I run a lot of the technical analysis there.
Maybe final thoughts for today's episode. We've been very glad to have you. How do you want to land the plane?
Good question. So I think my biggest thing for everyone is to just we waited this long. Reap the benefits, have a plan, make your money, get out, be happy, put your money into experiences in life. And if we are facing some sort of recession in the future, you're going to want to have some money behind you so that it's a lot easier for you than it's going to be for other people. I don't want to be all doom and gloom. So look at the bright side of those things. You'll be in a better space. You won't have to struggle, whatever the case may be. But look towards things with scarcity around it, strong fundamental value, all attributes that I very much believe that Litecoin has. And you'll do okay. And again, a lot of us are diehards. I get that. I've held certain precious metals and certain cryptos for years. Others I dump and don't care about. My Litecoin and Bitcoin, I actually have it's like gold and silver to me. It has like a place in my heart and in life. So, hold some of it. Just, sell a good amount, if you've profited from these rallies, and you never regret taking profits, but you absolutely will regret not taking profits.
Good word. Good word. Well, thank you for coming on, Tony. Of course, we thank you to all of our listeners as well today. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the 84 Million Podcast. Of course, you can find us on X. You can find us on YouTube. We'd appreciate subscribers wherever we are found. And of course, 84million.com/podcast. So, Tony, hope to have you down the road, maybe back on the show. And it was a great conversation. I think we learned a lot. And have a good one. We'll talk soon.
Thanks so much. Appreciate everybody watching.
Cheers.